Earlier on in the year, I made a tier list video where I talked about the best top laners in the game from a solo queue perspective, and that was like, months and months and months ago. So I decided to make an updated tier list where, it's like updated to 11.14, where we see all the best top laners and how strong all of them are if you're playing in solo queue. Obviously, this isn't like, for pro player or whatever, but yeah, this is Roku's updated solo queue tier list for top laner champions. I'm gonna go through every single tier and explain, like, what every single tier list, what every single tier includes, the type of champs, and then I'm gonna go through every single tier from left to right and explain why these specific champions are strong, what they're good at, and etc. Okay, so let's just start off with the first tier, God tier. So this tier is basically the champions that are good no matter what. Okay, you don't need hyper one-tricking knowledge to play them, and they're very good into basically every single scenario. You can brute force them through practically any champion select, and they're good in basically all elos. The only exception is like some of the more macro related ones might be A tier in lower elos, but they're still like super strong, especially in higher elos, right? A tier strong, these are basically your above average strong champions. They're very strong. They have either strong laning or, they're very good at what they do in the game. It's just that, they have some weaknesses or they're bad against some team compositions, but overall they're very strong and they're, your above average picks. Next is B tier, average. This is your average champion. So these champions are pretty good, pretty strong, and they're playable, but they have key weaknesses that kind of balances them out and, brings them into line. Up next is the C tier, playable. These champions aren't horrible, but they have like a very big flaw that stops them from being good into every single scenario. And that flaw can be something like, they're only good as a counter pick, or they're only good into certain team compositions, or they're very difficult to play, or they have a very specific play style. It's things like these that really holds these champions back. And D tier are just the super weak champions. These are the champions that only work in certain elos, or champions that are just, that don't really match up to other top laners, or champions that take way too much effort to play for the return you get. So, it takes way too much effort to play some of these champions, and, the return you get is just basically nothing. Okay, you might as well learn something else. And the last tier is the one-trick tier, because not all champions require the same amount of dedication and time to get a hang of. So I put all the one-trickable champions up into this tier, and generally speaking, if played properly, these champions usually are somewhere from A tier to S tier, depending on the champion, of course. Some of them are lower tier, some of them are higher tier, but generally speaking, they're A to S tier. So yeah, let's just go through every single champion. First off, Camille. Camille has been super strong for basically as long as living memory. Her laning is super easy because, like, the things that made her overpowered are still there. And the only reason we're not really talking or thinking about her is because there are even more overpowered things, okay? And the way how Riot is balanced in the game means that Camille will almost always be meta, and there will never be a point where she's unplayable, okay? And what's great about her is that she's basically viable in all elos. You can try to learn her laning and get fed in lane in lower elos and then crush the game. And in higher elos, her strengths of like macro roaming and just working with your jungler really come into play. So she's basically a great champion at all elos. It's just that she takes a little bit more knowledge to get used to the laning of, but once you get that done, it's very nice to play Camille. And also, there's a lot of things that you can take rune-wise to make it so that you're basically just ignoring laning phase. Grasp is still very broken on her. So yeah, Camille is S tier. Up next we have Dr. Mundo. The picture is obviously from the old Mundo, but we're talking about the updated Mundo, obviously. So Mundo is a very massive stat ball, okay? He is insanely tanky. He's insanely strong. And I've seen so many cases where he just starts walking at the enemy, and unless you kill him like 5-10 times in lane, he's gonna be this big, beefy, strong boss battle that just kills everything he touches, okay? So, like Mundo is still insanely strong, and what makes him really strong is actually the fact that he can basically, just interact with a lane just using his Qs, okay? So like he has the like capacity to play very very safe in lane, and if you want to stop him from farming, you basically just have to tank Qs, and tanking up you're just going to start losing, okay? And Riot gave him a ton of tools to, make him like, more playable in lane, and his team fighting is very strong, so he's a very very nice champion. Although for more organized games he's a tiny bit worse. In a SoloQ environment I'd say he's perfect. And another great thing about him, the reason why he's S tier, is he's very, very simple. He's very easy to play. Insanely easy. Yeah, nothing complex. Just pick him up and play him for like 5-10 games and you got the hang of him. So yeah, that's like, why Mundo is up here. Gwen. I dislike talking about this champion because of how broken she is. A lot of low elo players don't even understand how broken Gwen is. Like, basically no low elo top laner plays this champion properly. But like, so like her strengths are more obvious in high elo, but she's still strong in low elo. It's just that people don't know how to play her. But basically, your level 1 is so strong that you can be as aggressive as you want and just have prio over lane. And you can use this prio to go kill the jungler, go take fights in the river, all that stuff. So she's insanely good early on. And her level 6 all-in is very, very, very powerful, because she actually heals a lot from every single part of her passive too, so she's very hard to take down. Her team fighting is actually kind of broken, because basically, like normally, when you're playing another champion, and you go into a team fight to fight, you use all your damage, then the consequence is that the enemy team can now hit you, okay? The enemy team can now hit you because you expose yourself trying to do your damage. Not Gwen. Gwen has an ultimate ability for her W where she's basically invulnerable to anybody outside W, like CC, damage, everything. So this kind of breaks the dynamic of teamfights where to hurt her, you have to get in range to be like damaged by her, if that makes sense. And a good Gwen can kind of mess around with her W to make it so that, like, she pulls it just outside, so that she pulls it in a way where she's inside it and you're like outside it. So she can just hurt you while you can't hit her, which is very, very, very toxic and bad for the game. So yeah, Gwen, it takes a bit of skill to learn her, because she does have a very unorthodox playstyle, but she's very strong, and she's still basically the best top laner. And maybe, depending on, if the nerfs are really massive, she'll go down to A tier, but I'm pretty sure they won't do anything intelligent, because this is Riot Games we're talking about, so yeah, she's S tier. Irelia. Honestly, the changes they made show the sheer incompetence of Riot Games, because the changes they made to Irelia basically just straight up buffed her at all stages of the game, basically, okay? So yeah, they basically just took out some stats level 1, but then they snowball stats into later, and it's like, even like once she gets all of her abilities, she gets like, her passive stacked up by messing abilities up. Before with Irelia, it was like, okay, she is overpowered, but if you dodge her abilities, then you just kill her. But now, they made it so that not only is she overpowered, but she can also mess up and be overpowered. So, it's kind of like making Darius get his passive in 4 stacks, and letting him get like a bleed stack on people once he hits them with the inside of his Q. That's basically the kind of changes they made to Irelia. So yeah, she is very, very broken. Next, we have Set. Set did get hit with the Strikebreaker nerfs a lot, but I still think that he is one of the best SoloQ champions to play. Okay? He is effective at every single elo. He is very strong in lane 1v1s. He is an insane team fighter, a very, very nice frontliner, very good at peeling. Some builds can get you a lot of damage too, though I don't like those, but you can go for that. Some fun builds here and there. And the cherry icing on top of the cake, whatever, he is very, very simple to play. Okay? He, like, I'm pretty sure, like, a few passes ago, he was basically, like, the most popular top laner. So he's very, very simple to play, and very good at things that a top laner should be good at, okay? So, unless you're a one-trick, Set is definitely a champion you should be looking to put him into your champion pool. So he's a Very, very, very nice champion. Shen. When I was talking about the macro stuff, I was basically just talking about Shen. Shen is basically a champion who will always be S tier in solo queue. Okay? As long as top lane is the weakest lane in the game, Shen will always be S tier. Because Shen, like, the thing about top lane, why it's weak, is that to impact other lanes, you have to lose CS, okay? Because when you're going bot lane, your enemy is pushing top, okay? They're taking CS, they're taking plates, and you're losing your top lane CS, okay? So whatever you're getting must be worth that, or you're just instantly weaker. And the problem is, most of the time, it's not really worth it, okay? You get 1 kill, okay, you lost 2 waves and 2 plates. So that's horrible, okay? The power of Shen is that he can roam way more than other top laners, his roams have way more utility, and with good wave control, he has minimal losses while roaming, okay? So Shen is a very, very powerful champion in high elo, and he's an amazing champion to pick up in low elo because Shen kind of teaches you macro, okay? And a lot of loyal top laners have very, very bad macro, and in my opinion, Shen is a nice champion to play because it just teaches you macro. So he's one of the champions to help you learn the game better, so I think he's an invaluable champion, very, very powerful, very good, and overall S tier. If you're strictly talking low elo, like, let's say gold and below, I will put him A tier, but if we're considering all elos, then S tier, definitely. Wukong. We all know how strong Wukong is. He is very, very overstat, very strong. He has probably the best level 6 power spike in the game, where he can basically kill anybody 100 to 0 with his 2 ultimates. Though he has some troubles into some matchups earlier on, a properly played Wukong can just take care of those and still be an insane menace in lane. And he scales insanely well, and he's a monster in teamfights. If a Wukong walks out of lane ahead, he is gonna be such a nightmare for the enemy team to deal with, because he's not really someone you can just lock down and kill, you know? And if you're gonna put a lot of people to take him down, he's gonna take someone out. He's gonna take someone out with him, okay? So a strong Wukong is a nightmare, and Wukong is very overstat, meaning that there are a lot of lanes where he can just demolish them. And a lot of good, strong, high elo a lot of these champions, like some of these champions have bad matches into him, which is why he's so great. Next, A tier. Aatrox. Aatrox is a very, very solid champion. His laning is very good. He's very, very strong in team fights. His early fights, as in like earlier fights against multiple people, like I guess earlier team fights, if that makes sense, but more skirmishes. Yeah, earlier fights with Cho'gath, he's very, very good at them because he can get a lot of damage, a lot of CC out, so he's very, very useful to his team. And the only reason he's A tier is that laning with him takes a bit of skill, okay? It takes a lot of skill to land your Qs properly, it takes a lot of skill to, you know, understand how to play against all the matchups, but once you get that, he's a very, very strong, solid champion. Cho'gath. Cho'gath is arguably the strongest tank in the game in terms of the meta, because, in terms of, like, SoloQ, not the meta, because, like, a lot of tanks suffer the issue of, like, they're not strong enough to carry by themselves. But Cho'gath low-key is, because if you're a person who can land that knock-up rupture thing, and if you know how to use your silence to mess up with other champions, because there's a lot of champions where, you know, a carrier jumps in, she does her combo, and you just silence her, and she's basically just sitting there doing nothing, right? So your silence is very, very strong into certain compositions, and if you can hit your knock-up, you're basically just an insane monster, okay? The issue with Cho'gath is that he just takes a lot of skill, okay? Cho'gath takes, like, too much skill for him to be, like, you know, consistently go any higher, which is why I put him in S tier, because if you're playing him, like, really badly, it's B, C tier, but if you're playing well, he's a very strong champion, solid frontliner, solid peel, and actually a solid amount of damage. So yeah, Cho'gath, like, if you get fed with him, and if you're a big presence, you can be a very nice supportive presence for your team, and they can kind of, like, use you as a cover or whatever, so he's a very nice champion to have, if you can land your skill shots and stuff. Darius, our boy is not as strong as he used to be, but he's still very strong, in my opinion. Now, I put him A tier because, okay, let me clarify this. Higher elos with Darius is low A tier and high B tier, whereas lower elos with Darius is like high A tier and barely S tier sometimes. So I just balanced it by putting him in A tier, okay? Basically, if you know what you're doing, and if you can fight with Darius well, then you're gonna have a great time playing this champion because he's still strong at all the things he was strong at, right? He can clear whole teams by himself. He has insane damage. He's not the easiest guy to take down if he lands his Qs. He's like, he's a very 1v90 champion where if you get fed enough, you can just destroy everything. So yeah, Darius is an insanely great champion, very fun, very powerful in the right hands, and he takes a lot of skill to play, and his effectiveness varies with elo, because in higher elos there are team compositions that just cancel out his usefulness. But yeah, I would say that Darius is A tier. Okay. Fiora. I would say Fiora is a very strong champion, but she just takes a lot of skill to play, which is why I put her in S tier. Okay. Fiora is one of the game's last remaining split push champions, okay? I know they forced Hullbreaker onto people, I know they basically forced Hullbreaker into the game to get more champions to split push, but that's not going to happen because split pushing is a dead strategy, except for if you play Camille, Fiora, Jax, Tryndamere, and Fiora is one of the champions that can actually still split push, okay? So first off, her laning is very skill dependent. The more work you put into it, the better you are going to be at laning with Fiora, okay? You can beat most lanes with her if you play properly, so she's a very skill-reliant champion, and the more work you put into her, the better you do, okay? And she's very good at, split pushers. She's very good at 1v1s later on into the game. She's very good at playing the flank. Her weakness comes into the form of, team fighting, because her team fighting isn't the best, but she's very good at, if the enemy team is disorganized, you can very easily, I don't know how to put this, but she has so much usefulness in her kit and creativity that instead of taking 1v5, you can take 5 1v1s if the enemy team is disorganized enough and just kill everyone, okay? So there's a lot of skill with this champion, and she's potentially very, very powerful, but it just takes way too much skill to play her properly. So yeah, she's A tier. Jax. Jax is loving the new abusable items. Jax is, like I said, one of the only split pushers in the game, but it's kind of, he's not had the best time earlier on in the season. He's more so B tier earlier on in the season because, his matchups were kind of really bad and his effectiveness wasn't too high. But now with Divine being broken, also Bork still existing, Jax can abuse a lot of items and just really, really be strong. And Jax, I would say, is he's like a typical top laner, if you know what I'm saying, right? He's if you can get good at laning with him, he gets really fed and is really strong. He's very good at 1v1s. His 1v1s is actually one of the best in the game. He can just be a solid monster, and if you get fed enough with Jax, you can also be strong in team fights too. It's just that if you go for things like Bork and stuff, you're gonna be weaker in team fight but stronger in 1v1s. But that's just another strength of the champion, meaning that you can flex your build depending on what you need. Okay, he's only A tier because he takes a lot of skill to play the laning properly, but aside from that, he's a very nice champion to pick up in solo queue because, he's one of those champions where he's always going to be good if you play him well, okay? So it's it's a very nice pick to just recommend because it's Riot is not likely to just leave this champion in the dust messed up. So yeah, there's a lot of time you can put into him, a lot of things you can learn, and overall I'd say he's a pretty good, satisfying champion. Malphite. This guy is so, he basically exists for auto-filled players, or if your one-trick gets banned. He is so annoying in lane. His effectiveness is basically just ulting, okay? He just ults. That's all he does, There's no 1v9 carry you can do or anything, but the thing about Malphite is that he's gonna be useful no matter what, okay? If you get fed, if you don't get fed, and he has a lot of good matchups into some of these champions. So yeah, Malphite is a very, very toxic champion, and I put him A tier, not because of the things he can do, but because of how easy he is. Malphite is easier to play than Garion. He's just that brain dead to play. And this is not an insult, obviously, but if you've never touched him in your life, you can still play him quite well. So yeah. Next, Ornn. Ornn is another great tank that is very good as a champion. He's more so useful in higher elos, I would say, but he's still quite effective in lower elos. Ornn has a lot of skill to him. There's a lot of combos and stuff you can do. He's a team fighting monster. He can help his teammates out with his, extra stats on the items, like his passive where he just hammers out items for his teammates. So yeah, Ornn is a very, very nice choice. More so for a more organized play, but if you have skill with him and you can kind of lane well with him, he's also very good in solo queue, and that's actually one of his strengths. He is a very, very strong laner, if you play him properly, that is. He's one of the stronger laners when it comes to tanks, so, yeah. Basically, if you can put in the skill and stuff, you can basically come out of lane ahead. And an Ornn that's ahead is basically, like, nightmare fuel, because he's gonna one-shot you in one combo, and you can't do anything against him. So yeah, Ornn is very, very, very strong. Next is Tryndamere. Tryndamere is a very, he's very sleeper OP, I'd say. He's not obviously overpowered, but he's basically crept up, tier lists and usefulness lists. So yeah, he is very strong, and under the right hands, he's actually S tier, but Tryndamere is a very strong champion. So let's just break it down, okay? Though early laning with him can kind of suck, there's a lot of ways you can get kills on this champion, okay? It's just, like, trying to notice where you can get kills and playing it properly. That's what you need on this champion. And you can basically kill most top laners if you play it properly, so he's very, very good. Unless it's against champions like, Malphite or something, who can just tank up instantly and be impossible to kill until Tryndamere gets his items. But still, okay, Tryndamere has an avenue to get fed in a lot of lanes. And once the Tryndamere gets fed, he is like a boss battle. He just one-shots everybody with, like, this touch of death. A few crits, a few E's, and he's an insane split pusher. You need to definitely send multiple people to stop him, because if he is the most powerful person on the map, and 1v1 someone's trying to match him, he can just press R and dive that person and kill them on their turret, okay? So he is very, very hard to stop. And because of his mobility, he can basically cross walls and waste a lot of people's time, okay? He's a great time waster. He's a great split pusher. And he's one of the best scalers in the game, which is why he's so powerful. Lee Sin. Lee Sin was originally super, super, super broken a few patches ago, but Riot have, put his usefulness down and kind of nerfed him a bit. I think he's still strong. He's very good at, he's very good at working with his team. He's very good at roaming. And maybe his 1v1ing isn't as great as it used to be, but his trading is still very excellent. The only problem is that he takes a ton of skill to play properly, which is what's holding him back, along with the fact that, there's a lot of things that he can't do that other top laners can. He's not that good at killing towers and stuff like that. His 1v1 could use a lot of work. He's good at, like, disengaging and stuff, but he's not good at just fighting until the end and winning. It takes a lot of good trades first, and then he goes for the kill. Volibear. Volibear is a very, very, very nice champion. Very, like, not too difficult, but, he's basically a tank, but I would say he's more of a juggernaut. Because, like, if you fall behind with him, he functions more like a tank for his team, but he does a lot of damage. Staying near him is a death sentence, and he's not too mobile. So in my opinion, Volibear is more of a juggernaut than a tank, okay? Laning with Volibear, he's very, very strong, like, once he gets all of his abilities. Level 1, he's weak compared to some champions, but once he gets all 3 of his abilities, he can be very, very, very powerful into a lot of these matchups, and get insane trades down, and then finally go for the kill. His all-inning is actually really strong, because if he can get continuous stacks of his W, he can just constantly heal up and just stay in the fight, okay? So he's very good at all-ins, he's insanely good at short trades, and he has a lot of, like, powerful synergy with his junglers, because he's one of the best champions to dive the enemy with. So yeah, he's very, very strong, I would say, and he doesn't have too many weaknesses. The one weakness is that, he takes a lot of skill to play. He doesn't take a lot of skill to play, but, like, you have to know enough to not grief with him, because if you die a lot in lane as Volibear, you are super useless, okay? If you're feeding on Volibear, you are not a champion, so he's way more, feast or famine than, a lot of champions. Nocturne. Nocturne isn't the best 1v1er in top lane, but his thing is basically just cheesing the lane until level 6 and then finding places to ult, okay? So he's kind of like a more aggressive version of Shen, except like, Shen has, Shen is not really like pushover early on. Shen can kind of stand his ground, whereas Nocturne, once he gets his full like original combo out, he's basically just, done, I guess. And some of the stronger, like Darius, for example, he can't kill him quickly enough until the Darius can just come back and kill him. Because once Nocturne does his fear, does all his autos, his usefulness is kind of just over. Not his damage is kind of over, okay? So yeah. Like, it's very easy to grief on this champion and just die because you don't expect damage, but yeah. A lot of champions also can trade very well into him. So yeah, there's that. But he, like I said, is like Shen, but way more aggressive. In that, like, you push lane and then you go get kills. Push lane, go get kills, go get kills, right? Just work as like a second jungler for your team, okay? And unlike, a Shen or something, or like other type of teleport roamers, every roam makes you stronger too. Like, because you take the kills and stuff, right? So yeah. He's a very nice champion to, like, win the game quickly. But the problem is that, like, the later the game goes, the more screwed your team is, because Nocturne does not scale that well at all. So you better, if you're going to pick Nocturne, it better be into a good matchup, and you better end the game ASAP. Otherwise, it's over. I'm going to drink some. I'm going to hydrate a bit. Getting parched. Okay, we've gone through S tier, A tier, now let's go through BCT, BCD tier, and one trick tier. I'm gonna try to be quicker with these champions because, yeah, they're weaker, so they don't matter. Kale. Kale's a very nice champion, a lot of skill in her, but her main weakness is that she's not strong early. A lot of top laners basically just push her over earlier on, which is why I don't think she's that strong in SoloQ. Like, she's just weaker than other top laners, meaning that, like, whenever there's a fight with a jungler and stuff, she basically has no prio, probably gets pushed in, right? Her strength comes post 6, but, being weak early isn't good for a top laner. Next, Garion. Very, like, good champion for laning, has a lot of nets to fall back on. He doesn't need mana management, he doesn't need even good trades, because he's just going to heal everything back up. So yeah, he's basically top lane on tutorial mode. His weaknesses are that he's basically, he's not too playable in high elo if the players know what they're doing. His 1v1ing gets kind of scuffed in that, like, you can't actually outplay your opponent. So if you're up against someone who knows the matchup better than you, like, you're basically up against someone who can't play, or they're beating you, okay? So it's like, if you're up against someone who knows how to play the game, then you're gonna have a very bad time as Garion, okay? And also, from behind, he's basically kind of useless. So you have to just get kills level 6 using Ignite ult, or you are giga useless. Next is Gnar. I would say Gnar is more of a high elo pick. He's very good into some lanes. His tank form is very, very useful for some teams. But he's not really the, get kills, 1v9 carry kind of top laner. He's not very effective in lower elos, which is why I put him in B tier. Gragas. The only reason Gragas is here is because of his high elo performance, in that he has very good matchups into a lot of these champions, right? So he's trading insanely well. He's got good teamwork. It's just that, you need to have competent players on your team, and, like, unless they feed you like 10 kills, you're not going to have too much effectiveness on just your own. Illaoi. Illaoi is kind of like Garion, except I would say she's even weaker than Garion, because basically she's very defensive, okay? She's a very defensive champion, okay? Like, with how the game is so mobile, and the game is more aggression favored, like, a defensive champion doesn't really work quite well. She needs to have a very specific team composition to kind of support her playstyle. And the only thing that Illaoi is basically good for is cheesing kills in lane with her ultimate, okay? And maybe fights around Baron or, like, Dragon, but other than that, she's not that strong, So yeah. Maokai. Maokai is like the typical tank, good trades in lane, some wave clear, lots of great, team fight, he's very good in team fights, he's very good at peeling his team, all that stuff. He's just not that strong in solo queue because, tanks that don't have a lot of damage, tend not to be very strong in solo queue, because, in solo queue you gotta basically just, be... In solo queue, you're like very likely going to have someone on your team that doesn't know how to play the game, so you have to make up for that damage. Mordekaiser. I would say, depending on the buffs, he might be A tier, but Mordekaiser has been B tier for a while now. There's just a lot of bad matchups for him, and the way he kind of, like, his power spikes are kind of weird, in that he kills someone whenever he ults them, but in a normal team fight, he's only useful once he builds a bunch of his items, okay? So without items, Mordekaiser is very, very weak. So we kind of have this weird champion where he's not that strong earlier on. He's very easy to be counterpicked, actually. That's one of his weaknesses. He can very, very, very easily be counterpicked. So picking Mord first is like a death sentence versus someone who knows how to play the game. So yeah, he's kind of weird in that there are matches where he could do quite well, but he tends to be weaker than usual, like, 1 to 6. At level 6, he just straight up wins the all-in, but at that point, you better just get kills with your ultimate, because if you don't, it's just over, right? Because you're not going to get your items if you don't get kills. Renekton. Riot have really messed this champion up. Renekton used to be a great, amazing bruiser, but, he's so bad in the meta, he's basically unplayable, and, like, he still fits the criteria of a great top laner in that there's a lot of things you can do early game to get fed. He's got a lot of damage, a lot of mobility, he's very tanky, and he's not too weak earlier on, takes a lot of skill. It's just that, like, he's just eating so much nerfs and stuff. It's just that Riot don't like this champion because of his performance in pro play, right? They're nerfing his solo queue because of his pro play. So yeah, it's just unfortunate, but yeah, Renekton has been getting the shaft, basically. So that's why he's B tier. Rumble. Rumble is a great champion because he has the tools to play. He has the tools to do anything he wants, right? He's insanely versatile in lane. He's very strong, actually, because of the changes they did to him. A lot of damage, can one-shot people. The issue is just that, like, to play him well, you need to be good at the game too, right? You can't just one-trick Rumble. Because if you're like a gold player, Rumble is a very worthless champion for you because you don't have, like, other things around to support you, okay? Whereas higher elo players will, so they will know how to play this champion perfectly. TLDR, he's basically A tier-ish in high elo, but low elo he's C tier, which is why I put it in B tier. Next, Ergot. Ergot has kind of climbed back down. He used to be very, very strong earlier on into the season, but now he's slowly falling down, and he basically hovers around A or S tier because of how easy he is. He's quite easy to play, and you just kind of know, like, the few things to do in some matchups, things to look out for. Wasted abilities. Oh, if this champion wastes his E, I go in. You gotta look out for things like these. And, like, the thing with him is that, like, he's not exactly strong early, if that makes sense, right? He has to actually get to, like, he has to rank up his abilities and shit. He's one of, like, the strongest champions to scale with levels, but it's just getting there is a hard part with him, okay? And his items and stuff getting nerfed hasn't been helping him either. Next is Yorick. I would say Yorick is only good against certain teams and certain champions. Like, a very nice counter pick. He's B tier because of how easy he is to play, basically, right? It doesn't take a lot of skill to play him. And it's just that, like, he's a very one-dimensional champion. He's kind of like Garion in terms of how one-dimensional he is, but his thing is just taking down turrets. And if you're up against a more organized team, you can kind of have, it's a bit harder to do what you want with him if you're up against an organized team, because split pushing as a Juggernaut is a nightmare, okay? So he's very strong if you pick him against the right people, right team, but I wouldn't say he's a good one-trickable champion. Lulu, I just have her put here as a representative of all the, annoying supports, but you can kind of play the top lane and just waste time if you want to be a team slave. So, if you're autofilled, if you're a, bad player, just play something like this or Malphite and just team slave and, pray that your team carries you. Tahm Kench, I feel like the rework Tahm Kench is very weird because he has less stats earlier on, but if he can get through laning phase, he's like a monster in fights. He is so strong in team fights because of his shield, because his shield has a 3-second cooldown. So he uses a shield, it gets busted out, and then the cooldown starts. And if you use it properly, he effectively has like more than 1.5 times the health he already has if you use his shield properly, which is actually an insane number, like really just insane. So yeah, um, I would say the difficulty with Tom is getting through laning phase, which is why he isn't like the best top laner, but he is very strong in team fights. Um, okay, I've taken way too long already. I'll just speed through the rest of these. Gangplank, very good counter pick. He's basically the champion you pick to get carried in lane. The thing with Gangplank is that like the kind of aggressive like playstyle that Gangplank has of like, you know, getting kills and hitting barrels and stuff is not that encouraged. You just basically Q spam and just farm. And yeah, that's basically just a thing for high elo. If you're low elo, stay away from this champion. Heimer, he's basically just a counter pick. If you don't pick him into a good, you know, matchup, then basically, you know, it's useless. The thing is, he has a lot of good matchups, but all he does is just rule the lane. Okay, that's basically his whole usefulness. Next is Kale. If this was higher elo, she'd be like B8 tier, but because it's low elo, I can't put her any higher because she's very, very abusable in that, like, because of her weak early, you can just have cases where someone just kills you and kills you and kills you and kills you under turret, under base, wherever, right? She's very easy to just get like 10 kills off of. The thing is, like, you know, if you're able to effectively survive the early lane, you can get to a point where you're just a super fed, overpowered monster, and she's kind of like really strong in high elo because of that. But, you know, I wouldn't recommend her in lower elo. Kennen. Kennen is a very weird champion. I just don't think he's that useful for most players. He's playable into some matchups, but his laning is just annoying. Okay, he's basically built to survive. He doesn't do damage. His CC is like, you know, awkward because it takes a while for him to get his CC on someone, so it's not that fast. So he's just built to farm and run away from fights. That's all he does. And, you know, you basically just have to farm until you can ult Zhonya's into the enemy team, but I don't think that, you know, is a good top laner champion. Lucian. Ranged top laners tend not to be the best SoloQ picks because, like, basically when you pick something like Lucian or Vayne or something, you're kind of messing up your team comp. So you better get fed in lane. And if you don't get fed in lane, your enemy top laner is gonna be more useful than you. The thing with Lucian is that if you get fed on Lucian, you can be very, very, very powerful, okay, and get a lot done until hyper late game, which is when you fall off. It's just that if you lose on Lucian, the game is just over because you're worthless and your enemy top laner is insane. Okay, Pantheon. I would say Pantheon is weak because I guess in higher elos he's better because higher players can, you know, use his macro and stuff better. But against a lot of these meathead top laners, Pantheon just doesn't match up. Okay, he can poke them down level 1, whatever. But the second they get their abilities, he just, you know, starts losing all-ins. This isn't helped by the fact that his ultimate is not a combat ultimate. So if you're fighting against Wukong, okay, you can poke him level 1, 2, 3, whatever. Level 6, he just spins and starts murdering you. Okay, so yeah. He is not the best all-inner. So if you have the macro to just get a kill earlier on and then just roam and carry the team, sure, great champion. But you probably don't if you're low elo. So yeah. Quinn. Quinn is like the same with Pantheon, except for the fact that she's way more roam heavy. But like, she's also way more weak. You know, Pantheon can get a lot more done, and she needs way more kills to, you know, be useful. So I would say she's weaker than Pantheon, but she's just has better matchups in top lane, which make her a very nice, a playable pick. Teemo. Teemo's honestly just horrible in solo queue. All he does is just be annoying in lane, but the thing is he's very immobile, so unless he uses his shrooms properly, then, like, you know, he just gets ganked and very easily murdered, okay? And there's not a lot of Teemo players in the world who can use his shrooms properly. He's a very deceptively high skill champion. So yeah, because most Teemos will improperly use the shrooms, you're not gonna, you know, most Teemos are just gonna be very bad, okay? Very gankable, very easy to abuse, and if he loses, he's just useless, and he's not that good of a team fighter, unless people fight in his shrooms, you know? Vayne, like, you know, the rest of these guys, she's just here as a good counter pick. That's basically it. Messes up her team comp, whatever. Vladimir, if you want to sleep in lane, you can pick Vladimir. He basically is the same kind of thing as Kale in that you're not doing that much early. You're just farming until you get, you know, 2-3 items, and then you get back into the game killing everyone. But the bad part about him is that you kind of have to be strong earlier on to do much. If you're not, then, you know, your jungler can't get much notice out of you. Viego. Um, Viego is like kind of the same in that like he can kind of cheese some laners, but getting through early lane is like the hard part with him because Viego kind of spikes when he can kind of do his thing, get kills, and chain ultimate people and execute people in team fights. It's just getting there is the hard part with him, which is why I put him in C tier. Yone, this champion takes a lot of skill because a lot of champions in top lane can put up a very good fight against him and just keep murdering him on repeat. So he's not the easiest champion to play. He is like a broken, so obviously you can kind of outplay someone with your ult, your Q, whatever, right? Because he's broken. But like, if you don't space properly, you're just dead. Okay. Next is Cassiopeia. She's very good as a counter pick, but not much else. Trundle. Trundle is making a comeback lately into the meta, but it's gonna be a while until he gets, into the strong leagues. So yeah, he's kind of making a comeback. He's very good at 1v1ing, but that is pretty much it. He's very kiteable in team fights, and unless his team is ahead, he's not gonna be of that much use to him. Silas, he's just a counter pick to Malphite and stuff. So yeah, that's pretty much it. He's a counter pick, or you just don't play him top lane. Warwick, this champion is super cheese, super stupid. The thing with Warwick is that he's kind of one of the more, strong 1v1ers in lane. He's very hard to just beat in a 1v1, but that's basically it. Outside of lane, he is so useless and worthless. So yeah, if you just survive lane against Warwick, you kind of just, that's it, So I put him in C tier because he's basically just a cheese pick for getting kills. Nasus, weak as hell early. He's only good in 1v1s. His teamfight is weak unless he is super strong, because basically a strong ADC, strong support, they just lock him down and one-shot him because, ADCs do a fair amount of damage, obviously. So yeah, he's not tanky enough or mobile enough to survive it, like, team fights properly, okay? And his split push isn't that strong because of his immobility, because basically you're side laning, but the enemy team can just collapse on you very easily. And everybody's so mobile in the game that being a juggernaut means you can't split push. So yeah, like he's also only a low elo like pick. He basically does nothing in high elo. So yeah. Olaf is insanely strong earlier on. It's just that he falls up incredibly hard. And if Olaf stops getting kills, he stops being useless. So he takes a lot of skill to play, a lot of skill to learn how to get kills with him constantly. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Next is Rise. Useless champion, honestly. Just there to clear the wave and farm. And playing him takes a lot of, like, high elo macro skill and stuff, so I wouldn't recommend it at all. Swain, like, just useless, honestly. Not strong earlier on. Can't do that much without his items. It just takes a while for him to get started. He's basically like Vladimir, except it's harder for you to stay safe on him because you don't have, like, an invulnerability like him. Yasuo, he's honestly very playable into a lot of people, but it takes an insane amount of skill to play him, which means that putting skill into learning him is just not worth it. Now for the one-tricks, Jace is a very nice one-trick champion, can bully anybody, can bully a lot of champions just off of the first wave, so yeah, high-skilled camp champion, can do a lot, and if you get fed up with him, you can 1v9 the game, but just a lot of skill needed. Kled, same as him, honestly. A very strong frontliner. Insane if he is fed. If you can get fed with him, land your Qs and stuff, know how much damage you do, know how much damage the enemy does, you can get a lot of kills with him, get fed, and use your ultimate to just conquer the map. But again, that requires one-trick skill. Poppy, she's very abusive when ahead, just super hard to kill, does a ton of damage, just like, not exactly mobile, but can move around very quickly. So yeah, it's just that she takes a ton of one-trick knowledge to play. So she's one of the, I guess, weaker one-trick champions. Rengar. Rengar is a very cheesy champion, right? It takes a lot of skill to play in top lane, but he's very strong, can fit into a lot of team compositions, and a lot of outplaying you can do in this champion. So very nice one-trick champion. Riven, kinda OP if played properly, like S tier-ish, but yeah, she just is the perfect champion to one-trick. Lots of damage, lots of mobility, can roam everywhere, can work with a jungler, very strong early if she has Ignite, just kind of, like I said, she's just overpowered, actually. But yeah, you gotta one trigger to play her properly. Singed, I can't think of a champion that I, respect less than Singed. He's just so worthless. And like, I honestly think playing Singed is bad for a Loyola player because maining Singed actively stunts your growth because he plays a different game as to all these other champions, right? He does like a completely different playstyle and everything different. But this basically means that if you get used to him, you're not used to any of the other champions. So if you're a person who doesn't play Singed, stay away. Just play something else like Set or something that makes you learn the game better. And lastly, Scion. Honestly, his true usefulness only comes to play at higher elos where he's exclusively one-tricked. So yeah, normally I'd say he's a B tier, C tier tank-ish, but if you include the high elo playlist, then he's a one-trick pick because there's a lot you can do in this champion. Just watch someone like the Boss or something, and yeah, this champion takes a lot of skill and game knowledge to play properly, and you can do a lot with him. So yeah, that is pretty much it for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.